The sun had long sunk beneath the endless horizon, leaving behind a sky streaked with purples and darkening blues. In the remote village of Al-Dura, nestled at the edge of the Jordanian desert, the evening air carried a haunting chill. The wind swept across the dry earth, whistling through the narrow alleys between the stone houses, as if carrying whispers from far beyond the human realm. It was a place few dared to visit, its isolation a perfect barrier against the outside world. The villagers spoke little to outsiders, and their faces were often drawn in deep concern. For the elders, the fear of the desert was not just the merciless heat or the sudden storms that tore through the land. There were darker things that lingered beneath the shifting sands, things older than the village itself. One evening, a caravan of travelers, desperate for shelter after a long trek through the desert, stumbled into the village. The leader of the group, a seasoned merchant named Rami, was exhausted but hopeful. His group had been lost for days in the desert and had run low on water and food. The village seemed lifeless at first glance, but as they approached, a few villagers emerged from their homes. An elderly man, his back hunched from years of labor under the sun, greeted them in a low voice. "You are welcome, but you must leave before the moon rises high. The desert does not forgive those who linger." Rami, unsure whether the warning was superstition or something more, nodded politely, eager for a safe place to rest. He and his group were shown to a small inn at the village's center, where they quickly set about unpacking their meager belongings. That night, as the moon climbed higher, an uneasy silence descended upon the village. The wind had ceased, and even the usual cries of nocturnal creatures were absent. Inside the inn, the travelers tried to sleep, but the oppressive stillness made it nearly impossible. Suddenly, the door to their room creaked open, though none had entered. A soft, almost imperceptible whisper filled the air, like the rustling of unseen leaves. "Leave," it hissed. Rami's eyes shot open, and he sat up. The voice came again, this time more insistent. "Leave, before the dark ones come." He glanced around the room. His companions, still sleeping, were unaware of the strange disturbance. He stood and made his way to the door, convinced the wind had caused the eerie sounds. But as he stepped outside, his breath caught in his throat. In the courtyard, beneath the light of the full moon, shadowy figures stood, watching. They were unlike anything he had ever seen, tall and slender, their bodies twisted like vines, their faces featureless and dark, save for two glowing pinpricks of light where their eyes should have been. They did not move, but their presence was overwhelming, like the weight of 1,000 years pressing down on him. Rami took a step backward, his heart racing. He turned to run, but the path back to the inn seemed impossibly distant, and the figures remained unmoving, yet he could feel their gaze upon him. Suddenly, a voice spoke, this time, not from the shadows, but inside his mind. "Flee, if you wish. But know this, the desert calls to you, as it has called to many before." His legs trembled as he spun around to face the inn. The door was wide open now, and inside, he saw the same dark figures emerging from the shadows, their forms shifting and flickering like smoke. "Rami," someone shouted from within the inn, but it was not his name, no, it was a strange, guttural tone, a sound that made his blood run cold. The merchant's eyes widened as the innkeeper's face twisted in the same dark voids of those monstrous creatures. He had been deceived, the villagers had not been humans at all. Before he could react, the wind began to howl again, swirling around him in a violent gust. The shadows grew, stretching toward him like long fingers, their movements slow but deliberate. He tried to run, but the sand beneath his feet shifted, pulling him down with each step. "Leave, or be claimed." In the distance, the other travelers screamed in terror, their cries lost in the wind as the figures closed in. One by one, they fell silent. Rami stumbled through the village, desperately trying to escape, but the figures were everywhere now, crowding the streets, their forms stretching unnaturally long as they twisted through the air. No matter where he turned, they followed. He could hear their whispers, their voices echoing in his mind, filling him with despair. And then, as suddenly as it had started, the desert fell silent once more. The next morning, the villagers found the remains of the caravan, scattered throughout the village like discarded toys. The bodies were eerily untouched, their faces frozen in expressions of terror. The wind, which had been calm just moments before, returned to howl again, carrying with it the whisper that had haunted the travelers the night before. The desert was a place that took, but never gave back. And in the distance, beneath the sands, the dark figures waited, patient, eternal, watching for the next unwitting souls to cross their path.